I never thought I'd still be haunted by a job I quit years ago. But sometimes, even now, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can still hear it. The dragging sound, the whisper that didn't belong to any living person. I worked as a night custodian at a middle school for 5 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and for the most part, I didn't mind it. At first, I actually liked being alone in the building. There were no kids running through the hallways, no teachers piling up complaints about broken equipment, no constant chatter. Just me, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of my mop swishing across the tile floors. I'd clock in around 10 at night and leave right before sunrise, just in time to see the buses pull up with sleepy-eyed kids. But the school changed at night. During the day, it was loud, filled with life. At night, it was like being trapped inside a hollow carcass. The air felt heavy. The walls creaked and groaned as if the entire building was breathing, shifting, watching. You notice things you don't when the halls are full, the smell of damp concrete, the faint echo of your footsteps bouncing back at you too quickly, like something else was following a second behind. Most of it, I learned to ignore. The clanging pipes, the old lockers snapping open on their own, the faint buzzing of the failing lights. But there was one place in that school I could never get used to. The basement. The school had been built in the 1950s, and the basement was nothing like the polished classrooms upstairs. Down there, it was all concrete walls, unfinished ceilings with thick pipes running overhead, narrow passages, and storage rooms stacked with broken furniture and boxes of textbooks nobody would ever read again. The smell never left, damp mildew, something sour that clung to your clothes long after you came back upstairs. When I first started, one of the older custodians, Dave, pulled me aside and said, "Listen, kid, avoid the basement unless you absolutely have to go down there. Stuff in that place doesn't sit right." He grinned, called it haunted, but his eyes told me he wasn't joking. I laughed it off then, but even on my first week, I understood what he meant. The moment you opened that heavy steel door and started walking down the stairs, the air grew colder. It was like stepping into a different world, a place cut off from the rest of the building. I spent 2 years mostly avoiding it. But one night I didn't have a choice. It was late, maybe around 1 in the morning. I had my task sheet taped to the cleaning cart, and one of the notes was highlighted, "Bring up folding chairs for assembly." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly where those chairs were, stacked against the wall in the second storage room of the basement. For a full minute, I just stood at the top of the basement stairwell door, my hand resting on the handle, debating whether to call my supervisor and claim the chairs could wait until morning, but I didn't want to look lazy. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight, and opened the heavy door. The stairwell echoed with each step, my boots sounding way too loud against the concrete. At the bottom, I flipped the light switch. Only 2 of the overhead fluorescents buzzed to life, leaving most of the hallway drowned in shadow. The smell hit me instantly, wet cement and mold. I turned on my flashlight and started walking, the beam slicing through the darkness. The second storage room was on the left. The first door I passed opened into a room filled with old desks stacked to the ceiling, their legs jutting out like skeletal limbs. I kept moving until I reached the second door. The handle was rusted, and when I pulled it open, the hinges screamed like nails down a chalkboard. Inside, the folding chairs leaned against the far wall in uneven stacks. Dust coated everything. I bent down, grabbed 4 at once, and started to pull them free. That's when I heard it, a soft dragging sound echoing down the hallway. It was faint, like someone slowly sliding their shoe across the floor. I froze, hunched over with the chairs in my arms, holding my breath. The sound stopped. My heart hammered in my chest. I straightened up, crept toward the doorway, and shined the flashlight down the hall. The beam cut through the dark, but there was nothing. Just empty concrete and shadow. I stood there, listening so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. After what felt like forever, I told myself it was probably just the pipes, or maybe I'd nudged a chair without realizing it. I carried the load back toward the stairs, forcing myself not to glance behind me. Halfway there, I felt it, a cold draft brushing across my face. The basement was always warm and stale, suffocating almost, but this air felt icy, like standing in front of an open freezer. I stopped dead in my tracks, flashlight beam trembling in my hand. I scanned up and down the hallway, but nothing was different. Shaking it off, I dropped the first load of chairs at the bottom of the stairwell and went back for more. When I re-entered the storage room, I paused. Something felt wrong. The stack of chairs looked different, as if they had shifted while I was gone. I frowned, trying to remember how they had been leaning. I finally told myself I was just being paranoid and picked up another load. This time, as I turned to leave, I heard it again. A thump, then a scraping sound, louder, closer. My flashlight shook in my hand as I aimed it down the hallway. 20 feet away, a classroom door that should have been shut tight was cracked open. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't touched that door. The school was locked every night. Nobody else was supposed to be down here. I stood frozen, clutching the chairs to my chest, staring at that sliver of darkness beyond the cracked door. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Finally, I dropped the chairs with a loud clatter and forced myself to creep toward the door. Each step echoed off the walls far too loud. My throat was dry. When I was close enough, I called out, "Hello? Anyone down here?" My voice cracked. It sounded weak and pathetic. No answer. I swallowed hard, shoved the door open with one hand, and shined the flashlight inside. The room was empty. Dusty science equipment, boxes stacked high, cobwebs in the corners. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. I stepped inside for a second, scanning the shadows. That's when I heard it again, a dragging shuffle. Only this time it came from the hallway behind me. I spun around so fast the flashlight nearly slipped from my hand. The beam cut through the hall, but there was nothing. Just the same cracked walls and concrete, but I felt it. That heavy pressure, the prickling sensation when you just know someone is watching. I backed out of the room slowly, never turning my back, and walked as fast as I could to the stairs. My boots thundered against the steps as I climbed two at a time, my breath ragged, my hands shaking so badly I could barely carry the chairs. Once I reached the main hallway upstairs, I slammed the basement door shut, locked it, and leaned against the wall, gasping. Sweat dripped down my back even though the building was cold. I told myself it had to have been rats, pipes, maybe a draft, but I couldn't explain the door. I avoided the basement for a week, but one night I was mopping the hallway directly above the stairwell when I heard it. Bang, 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 3 loud, deliberate knocks from beneath my feet. The mop slipped from my hands, water pooling on the tiles. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. The knocks echoed, then silence. I took one slow step back, then another. That's when the basement door rattled violently, as if someone had shoved it from the other side. My blood went ice cold. I didn't open it. I didn't breathe. I just gripped the mop handle like a weapon and stood there until the rattling stopped. From that night on, I refused to go into the basement alone. If the task list said something was down there, I waited until another custodian was working with me. I never told them what I'd heard because I knew they'd laugh, but I'll never forget that night. The dragging footsteps, the cracked door, the whisper of cold air that had no place in that stifling basement, and the feeling deep in my gut that I wasn't alone. Even now, years later, I can close my eyes and hear it, the slow shuffle following me through that concrete maze, and I know without a doubt that whatever was down there, it's still waiting. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life, warehouses, construction, even a short stint at a grocery store. But the one job that left scars I can't shake wasn't dangerous in the way you'd expect. It wasn't physically demanding. It didn't even involve much human interaction. I was a hospital janitor, night shift. People think working in a hospital means constant chaos, but that's during the day. At night, the halls are dim. Most of the patients are sedated or asleep, and the place is suffocatingly quiet. Too quiet. When I first started, I told myself I'd be fine. I wasn't squeamish. Blood, vomit, even the occasional body bag. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't bother me the way it might bother someone else. What nobody warns you about, though, is the atmosphere. Hospitals at night are different. The air feels heavier, like every wall has absorbed decades of suffering and won't let go. I worked the lower floors mostly, the surgical wings, supply closets, and the long, empty corridors that never seemed to end. They put me on nights because I didn't complain. I kept my head down and did the work, but there was one floor, one assignment, that I dreaded every single time it showed up on my sheet. The West Wing. The West Wing had been partially shut down years earlier. Supposedly it was under renovation, but the work had been ongoing for over a decade. Half the lights didn't work, the walls were stripped to the studs in some rooms, and the smell was different down there. Stale, chemical, like rot barely covered with bleach. Every time I asked why they didn't just close it off, I got the same shrug. They keep it for overflow, in case of emergencies. But in the 2 years I worked there, I never once saw it used for actual patients. Until one night. It was about 2:30 a.m. when I was sent to the West Wing to mop up a spill in one of the corridors. I dragged my cart down the elevator, the wheels squeaking against the floor. The doors opened to near darkness. Only a handful of lights flickered in the long hallway, leaving most of it swallowed in shadow. I pushed the cart out and the elevator doors closed behind me with a metallic thud. Immediately, the air felt colder. My breath didn't fog, but I could feel goosebumps crawling up my arms under my uniform. I tried to move fast. Mop, bucket, finish the corridor, get the hell out. About 10 minutes in, I heard it. A voice. It was faint, distant, like someone murmuring behind a closed door. At first, I thought it was coming from upstairs, echoing through the vents. I paused, listening. The sound didn't stop. I wheeled the cart a little farther down the hallway, past dark doorways with peeling paint and rusted equipment shoved into corners. The voice grew louder. I couldn't make out words, but it had a rhythm, like someone speaking softly to themselves. Finally, I stopped outside one of the old patient rooms. The door was ajar, creaking slightly as if it had been pushed open not long ago. I gripped the mop handle tighter, swallowed hard, and slowly nudged the door open. The room was empty. A cracked bed frame sat in the center. No mattress, just the metal skeleton. The curtains were half torn, dangling like shredded skin. My flashlight beam passed over the corners, and for a second I thought I saw something crouched there. But when I blinked, it was gone. I exhaled shakily and stepped back into the hall. That's when I saw her, a patient. At least she looked like one. She was standing at the far end of the corridor, maybe 30 feet away, her hospital gown hanging off her thin frame. Her skin was so pale it almost glowed under the flickering light. She wasn't moving, just watching me, ma'am. I called out, my voice trembling. Are you lost? Do you need help? She didn't answer. I took a hesitant step forward, raising my flashlight. The beam lit up her face and my stomach dropped. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her mouth slightly open like she was mid-breath. But she wasn't breathing. Not once did her chest rise or fall. I froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, but part of me, the part trained by months of night shifts, told me this had to be some kind of patient who'd wandered out of bed. Maybe dementia, maybe sleepwalking. I couldn't just abandon her, ma'am. I tried again, softer this time. That's when she started walking toward me, not fast, not slow, just steady, her bare feet slapping against the tile with a faint, wet sound. Each step echoed unnaturally, like the hall was amplifying the noise. I felt my throat tighten. Something about the way she moved was wrong. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides, her head tilted slightly to one shoulder. Her eyes never left mine. I stepped backward, my hands shaking so badly the mop clattered to the floor. Okay, I'm gonna get you some help, all right? My voice cracked. She didn't stop. My back hit the wall. I hadn't realized I was retreating so fast. My flashlight flickered, the beam sputtering as the batteries struggled. For one horrifying second, the light cut out completely, plunging me into total darkness. When it came back on, she was gone. The hallway was empty. My chest heaved as I spun in circles, scanning every doorway, every corner. Nothing, just the silence of the West Wing pressing in around me. I don't even remember picking up my cart. I just remember running, sprinting down that corridor, the wheels rattling behind me, my shoes squealing against the tile. I didn't stop until I was back inside the elevator, slamming the button for the main floor over and over. When the doors finally closed, I felt tears stinging my eyes. My heart wouldn't slow down. I told myself I'd imagined it. A trick of the light. Exhaustion. Maybe I'd even dozed off on my feet for a second and dreamed it. That's what I clung to. But then it happened again. 2 weeks later, I was sent back to the West Wing for routine cleaning. I begged the supervisor to send someone else, but he just rolled his eyes. It's just a hallway, man. You mop floors, not ghosts. That night, I kept my head down, worked fast, and tried not to listen. But around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps, not mine. Soft, bare, slapping against the tile. I froze mid-swipe, mop dripping water onto the floor. The sound grew closer, echoing through the hall. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and there she was again. The same patient. Same pale skin. Same wide, unblinking eyes. Only this time she was closer. Just 20 feet away. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. My skin prickled. I realized she wasn't just walking, she was mouthing something. Over and over, I strained my ears and finally I caught it. "Don't let him out." The words were faint like a breath, but unmistakable. My stomach lurched. I stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the wet floor. Who? Who are you talking about?" My voice was barely a whisper. She didn't answer. She just kept repeating it, lips moving in that same unnatural rhythm. "Don't let him out. Don't let him out." Then without warning, her head snapped to the side as if she'd heard something behind her. Her face twisted into an expression of pure terror, and she bolted, not toward me, away. Down the hall, faster than I thought possible, her bare feet smacking against the tile until she vanished into the dark. The silence that followed was worse than the encounter. I stood there shaking, clutching the mop handle like it could protect me, my mind spinning with what I'd just heard. Don't let him out. Who was him? After that, I refused to work the West Wing. I told my supervisor flat out that if he sent me down there again, I'd quit. He laughed at me, but I didn't care. I thought I was done with it. I thought I could put it behind me. But a month later, the hospital made headlines. A construction crew had gone into the West Wing to start demolition on one of the old storage rooms. Behind a false wall, they found a sealed chamber. Inside, there was an old bed frame, restraints bolted to the walls, and deep scratches in the concrete floor. The report never said who had been kept there, or why. The hospital brushed it off as outdated psychiatric housing from decades ago. But I know better. I know what she was trying to warn me about, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear her voice. Don't let him out. The problem is, I think he already is. Most people think office buildings are boring places. Beige walls, cubicles, stale coffee, nothing scary about them. And during the day, they're right. They're filled with noise, phones ringing, footsteps, printers humming. They feel alive, but at night they're dead. I was the night janitor for a 6-story office building downtown. I'd taken the job because it seemed easy, quiet, a paycheck without much stress. I clocked in around 9 in the evening, did my rounds, and left before sunrise. Most of the time it was just me, a bucket, and the hum of fluorescent lights. The building was old, built in the late 1940s, and parts of it still carried that history. Cracked marble tiles in the lobby, ornate brass elevators that always smelled faintly metallic. Long, echoing hallways with ceilings too high, like the architects hadn't wanted anyone to feel comfortable. The first few weeks were uneventful. Dust, trash, vacuuming. I liked the solitude. But the longer I worked there, the more I realized the building didn't sleep as easily as it should have. Some nights I'd hear phones ringing on desks in empty offices. I'd pick up, and there would be nothing but static on the other end. Other times I'd catch the smell of cigarette smoke drifting through a corridor, even though the building had been smoke-free for decades. Little things. Things I brushed off, until the 6th floor. The 6th floor was almost entirely vacant, just a handful of offices used for storage, most of them stripped bare years ago. The lights up there flickered constantly, and the ventilation system made the whole floor feel too cold. I only had to go up once or twice a week just to check for leaks or sweep up dust. I hated it. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was mopping the hallway outside a row of locked offices. My bucket sloshed, the mop squeaked across the tile. That's when I heard typing. The sound was faint but distinct, keys clacking rapidly like someone hammering away at an old typewriter. I froze, mop halfway across the floor, and listened. The sound was coming from the office at the very end of the hall. I knew it was locked. All of them were. I'd tried the handles before out of curiosity. They hadn't been opened in years. The typing continued steady, mechanical. Against my better judgment, I walked down the hall. Each step echoed unnaturally, like the building itself was listening. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. The typing was loud now, relentless, almost frantic. I reached for the handle. My hand was trembling. It turned. The door creaked open just enough to let a sliver of cold air wash over me. The room beyond was dark, except for the faint glow of a desk lamp sitting on a dusty old table. Papers were scattered across the surface, yellowed with age. And there in the middle sat a typewriter. Its keys were moving. On their own. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The sound of typing grew louder, filling the room until suddenly it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I stood there shaking, staring at that machine, waiting for something else to happen. Then slowly, the typewriter slid a fresh line upward. I couldn't stop myself. I stepped inside. On the page, a sentence had been typed. "Why are you here?" My blood went ice cold. I didn't wait for another word. I bolted out of the room, slammed the door shut, and didn't stop running until I was back in the lobby. For weeks after, I avoided the 6th floor. I lied on my checklist, said it was clean, said I'd checked everything. Nobody questioned me, but the building didn't let me ignore it. I started hearing the typing again from the floors below. Faint, but always there, drifting through the vents. Sometimes I'd find sheets of paper in the trash with strange, fragmented sentences typed on them. "Don't look at him. He waits." Below. I never saw who put them there. Then one night, I made the mistake of riding the elevator to the 6th floor without thinking. I meant to stop on the 5th, but the elevator lurched past and the doors opened onto that dead, frozen hallway. I should have stayed inside, but something pulled me out. The hallway was darker than usual, the lights buzzing faintly overhead. At the far end, the office door was wide open. A pale glow spilled out, flickering like candlelight. I told myself I'd take a quick look, then leave. I told myself I had to face it or I'd lose my mind, so I walked. Each step echoed like a gunshot. My breath came shallow, my throat dry. When I reached the doorway, I peered inside. The typewriter was gone. In its place was a man, at least I thought it was a man. He was sitting at the desk, hunched over, his back to me. His suit looked decades out of date, gray and threadbare. His hair was slicked back, though patches of scalp gleamed through. "Sir?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. He didn't move. I took a step inside. The air was icy, my fingers numb. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak louder. "Sir, the building's closed. You're not supposed to be here." Slowly he turned. I'll never forget his face. His eyes were sunken, black hollows that seemed to swallow the dim light. His skin sagged like melted wax, stretched too thin over sharp bones. And his mouth pulled into a grin that split far wider than it should have, showing rows of yellow teeth that didn't end. I stumbled backward, choking on my own breath. The man stood. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound like nails on metal. He towered over me, impossibly tall. His limbs too long, his movements jerky, unnatural. Then he spoke, but his mouth didn't move. The words echoed inside my head, deep and cold. "You shouldn't be here." I turned and ran. I don't remember the stairs. Don't remember bursting through the lobby doors into the night air. All I remember is the sound of typing following me all the way down, as if invisible fingers were hammering keys inside my skull. I quit the next day. I didn't give notice, didn't pick up my last paycheck. I just left. The building still stands. People work there during the day like nothing's wrong. They laugh, they make phone calls, they print their reports. But I know the truth. That place isn't empty at night. Something lives on that 6th floor. And every now and then, when I walk downtown, I pass the building. If I stop and listen just for a second, I swear I can still hear it. The steady clack of a typewriter echoing through the windows, asking me the same question I can't answer. Why are you here?